We'll get started. I did not hear from Jacqueline. I don't know.
I didn't
Bill or
either.
anyone. Okay. Then we'll go ahead and just get started then. We'll call this meeting to order, 6:03 p.m. Let's go ahead and Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Thank you. Chair Eric Lawson,
Present.
Vice Chair Barron.
Here and on the way.
There he is. Okay. Lisa Butler. Present. Mike Acquardi. And Jacqueline Hunt. I'll keep an eye out for her. I don't see her yet. And your ex officio this evening is Councilor Rush Sheldon.
Yep, present.
Thank you.
Great. Any public comments submitted ahead of time?
None.
Only public comments. I don't see anyone online, so we will go ahead and assume no public comment at the time. Last month's meeting, we met with Roll Tide Properties, and Dave was able to walk through some of the developments with his development and the commercial retail space going in there behind Taco Bell. Some good insight on some of the businesses potentially going in there, as well as how we can help some other businesses that are not officially going to be in that space. We briefly touched on the downtown walkthrough observations, which I wanted to follow back on a little bit this meeting. And then went through a couple more updates with the EOA, the UGB, which, by the way, the UGB process has been delayed. We were going to have a meeting this week with the project advisory committee. It'll now be delayed, so we won't have an update on that potentially until just the next meeting or after. And then we also did a quick rundown of some of the other updates within the city. So any questions, comments on last month's meeting? Someone like to motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I make a motion to approve last month's meeting minutes.
I will second.
Thank you, Chris. All those in favor? Aye.
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 And all those opposed? All right, those minutes are approved. We can get started into unfinished business here. Just to start off, we kind of went back and forth if we were gonna go ahead and skip this month's meeting or just have a pretty short meeting. I was thinking it would be good to meet as a group and just keep some momentum going. So it'll be a pretty quick meeting, but you can blame me for pulling you away from your families this evening. I wanted to start with that downtown walk, like I mentioned. If there were any other call outs, questions we had, things we wanted to discuss further. I know we didn't have as much time last month really diving into it. So a couple of items I think we talked about were diving into just really next steps and how that ties into like the downtown plan and the committee for that, things like that. So I guess I'll kind of open it up if there are any other questions, comments from that observation, specific lots or areas that we discussed last meeting as well. Yeah, we're still getting back into it.
No, I'm trying to think of, I don't know if it's correct or not, but I thought I saw that the red house is back on the market again.
I did see that as well. Is that correct?
With opportunity.
My favorite topic. Um, So the Red House is, to my knowledge, is back on the market. I don't know if anybody has been by it lately, but it probably took the most and prominent damage from a tree down at the storm last week. So one of the large, it is back on the market, but it has been damaged. One of the large trees in front of the house snapped midday around 1 o'clock during the worst of the wind gusts. And half of one of those trees fell towards the building, took out the one corner of the southeast corner of the roof, and took out part of the first floor eave. The roof is damaged enough where it looks like water is definitely going to be getting into the upstairs. If water hadn't already been getting into the upstairs because it's not been kept in good shape. So it is back on the market and we're watching that closely, guaranteed. But what the upshot of damage is, we're not quite sure yet, but I'm willing to bet next month I can come back with a lot more of an update about what's going on.
Is that going as a cash only offer at this point?
Based on the 3 offers to date that the owner has accepted and prospective buyers done their due diligence, I think it's whatever method of payment financing. I don't think there's any restriction on that, Chris.
In terms of next steps with some of I know there are a couple vacant lots that we talked about could be areas of opportunity. Whether it be for movie nights is one of the ideas, or festivals or farmers markets, things like that. I think just building out that database that Mary Bosch had recommended, that I think is our natural next step, just really quantifying the properties in the areas. And then from there, we can take next steps. So I think is that something we want to do as a group? Is that something we want to divide and conquer outside of these meetings? Does anyone have any real preference between the two?
Well, I think it would be useful to just get a rough database of the properties that could be redeveloped or just reused, especially those that are owned by the city. And yeah, the movie nights idea, I think we should try and run with, maybe not movie nights specifically, but just doing something with that empty parking lot, because it isn't even used as a parking lot really most of the time. The only time it fills up is Garlic Festival, and even getting some furniture out there, some street furniture, some little potted plants. I feel like it could just make things look a little nicer.
Agreed.
We're getting nitty gritty, but we're talking database and the size of the properties we have and our abilities. We're talking about a Google Sheets essentially,
Yeah.
someone volunteering, putting the properties in, putting like what our status is if we've talked to the owners, or who the owners are if we've talked to them, that kind of information.
Yeah, that's essentially how I envisioned it.
Yeah.
It's just a live document. If we do have owners' contact information,
Mhm.
though some of the overall size attributes of the land, things like that, which was kind of part of our walk, was we're able to pretty easily get that observational data. It's just a matter of getting it into one document that we can work on, but I think it's probably our time would be best spent just having someone volunteer to do that instead of all of us as a group.
I can volunteer to do that.
Okay,
We're just talking about like that basic spreadsheet with
Yeah.
the properties we walk by. I can get that started.
okay,
And if you get it into a spreadsheet,
Yeah.
I can take that and make it into something a little more flashy that we can show the perspective of business owners or people that want to come in and develop properties.
And maybe we have two versions, because I can see one, working version for us about like, hey, have we had contact with the owners, and then maybe one that you would want to share it with other people.
More external.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like that.
Okay, I'll at least get the version for us started, by next meeting.
Perfect.
Okay. If you need anything else. Okay, and I think since it's been a couple of months since we did the walk, I would glad, once we have people share any comments or things they remembered from the walk
Yeah.
into the spreadsheet.
And that graphic that I made for our previous meeting,
That map.
could share that with you.
Okay, that would be great. That would be a good start.
Excellent. Sounds great.
One note, Lisa, the timing of your volunteering is fortuitous because you're about to have a gigantic document dump for the downtown plan.
Oh.
And there will be a lot of good info in that draft document that you'll be reading, being on the committee,
Okay,
but there's a lot of detailed information about some of the sites and some of the properties, not all of them certainly, but a number of them. And so that'll kind of be a nice refresher.
Okay.
Help with that. So lean on the document heavily is what I'm saying.
and it just so the next meeting, the downtown PAC meeting is the Tuesday before our EDC meeting in January.
Oh,
Just an update.
Yeah, last day of the month.
Great.
Oh, last day of the month. Oh, the first.
so then, we'll be able to go through some updates during that meeting and just try to bridge the gap there. Was there any items in that plan, as far as you know, Bill, that we should discuss during this meeting, or just wait till it gets released next month?
I think your February meeting could be a very downtown meeting, because the downtown plan document is going to be released, and that's kind of the consolidated, concentrated pull together of all the work that's been done and kind of the formal. It's basically an action plan document, and it kind of divides it into things in due in the first 2 years, due 2 to 5 years, and then beyond 5. And the first 3 sections have to do with economic revitalization. So doing action items, and Mary talked about a number of them, but not all of them. But how to enhance, what to do, what you can do, what this body can do, and what it's for, actually specifically the called out role of the EDC on helping the city enhance the business environment, help businesses in buildings. Focus on helping to figure out, particularly handing recommendations over and working with the city via the URA on what it can do about the condition of buildings and properties, that the building and property themselves. That's what a URA has to focus on, is land and property. Oregon Main Street Association, and then other efforts are what you can do to help the businesses operating in those buildings. And then the final thing is very specifically kind of underutilized vacant property, kind of the longer term stuff. And so all of that will be out for review and discussion at the next downtown PAC meeting. And then the following day, I think, is the EDC. And so you can kind of bring it all together.
Cool. Sounds great. Perfect. Just jumping back up to the downtown walk. Any other questions? I think that's a good start. We'll get the database. Database is a pretty strong word for what we're gonna build, but it makes it sound good. So
The mainframe.
the mainframe, we're gonna add the mainframe to build this database. Any other downtown points? Good start. To Bill's point, the downtown plan review, we'll do that next month as well. And then the UGB project advisory committee, we were scheduled to meet tomorrow, I believe it was, and that got pushed as well due to some potential new developments for the city regarding the CHIPS Act and overall plans that could affect the UGB in a pretty significant way. So that has been delayed, and we'll report back on that one when we have that meeting.
What is the CHIPS plan?
The CHIPS Act is the semiconductor manufacturing. Essentially, a lot of money is going to be coming through Oregon for chip manufacturing, and so I believe there's some items in the works. We don't know for certain. I don't know
I can
the
speak to that.
details. Okay.
So the semiconductor task force, chaired by the governor, co-chaired by the governor, Senator Wyden, and Maria Pope, CEO of PGE. And it's kind of cast of 1,000 characters that, you know, very much influence things in Oregon. At least they're all on the same committee working towards the same goal. That's an accomplishment in and of itself. This committee, because of, for a number of reasons, but the committee and the state, including the legislature, have recognized North Plains's progress on its UGB expansion. And because North Plains is so far along in its process, it is poised to potentially be the first, if not only, industrial lands expansion that will be approved and have land ready within the 2 to 3 year time frame that the Federal CHIPS Act requires the spending to occur within. And that's the key point here, is that the 21 or however many billions of dollars that the CHIPS Act released, and let's not forget the big infrastructure bill that was passed, completely different one, and signed by the president. That's another several $100 million in infrastructure that's going to be in part due to Oregon. So we're talking two federal sources of dollars, not just the CHIPS Act, but specifically the CHIPS Act has about a 2 year time frame for 2 to 3 year time frame at most for at least 80% of all that money to be spent. And because North Plains was kind of moving right along with its efforts, it's really kind of not, it's kind of the only game in town regarding an approved UGB amendment and sizable industrial land expansion to qualify potentially for state investment. And the task force sees North Plains as a strong opportunity, but we don't, we're kind of waiting around to hear what do you mean by that? You know, so we're working, what specifically, are you committing to something or what are you doing? We don't know that, we just, they've been working with us and they're working towards something. Having said that, we had a meeting last night with City Council and we kind of talked about the task force and our UGB expansion. And you can expect that the UGB advisory committee, the next meeting will be put back on the calendar ASAP. Because we're going to move forward expressing our interest as being a partner in anything that comes along, but we're not going to let the process and what we want to do be co-opted by something coming along like that. So we'll welcome it in addition, but we're going to move forward with what we're doing. So
That was my question, is that how drastically does that change the overall alignment on what the goal was going up until now, especially what we discussed pretty briefly as a committee on what we would ideally like to see with the expansions.
yeah. So no, Chair Lawson, that great question. So to my delight, council gave us very, very clear direction to work with the state in, well, letting the state know we're moving forward with our UGB expansion as we planned. And if you want to do even more with us, great, we'll work with you on that, but we're doing our thing.
Okay, sweet. Thank you, Bill. I guess any questions regarding the UGB, how we, the committee, kind of tie into that and see that? Your eyes on that.
You're on that committee.
Yeah, I think just you bringing information and downloading into the group and seeing where we can get plugged in. I think that's a good start. Sure.
I have a question. What's been the committee or any group's work on or analysis on the desirability and pros and cons of being of this opportunity? Like how many acres and what are the good things and bad things of having acres eaten up by semiconductor fabs?
There's been no cost benefit analysis per se about that. Our economic opportunities analysis, I should point out, the economic opportunities analysis that was adopted in November by council, with second ordinance reading, we got no notice of intent to appeal from anybody, including Thousand Friends, unlike Hillsborough. They went through the same calendar process for their EOA update as we have, almost lockstep. But they were appealed by Thousand Friends, ours was not. But that EOA document that we adopted kind of goes through and does identify the different kind of industry opportunity, including semiconductor to some extent, and identifies land need for it, and why North Plains is a good location for that. But as far as like any cost benefits, there is treatment in there about the fact that semiconductor and other industries not only employ a lot of people, but put a lot of investment in place. And so the city, kind of adopted the approach that that's a positive thing. Unlike, say, data centers that put a lot of capital in place, they don't employ anybody. They employ very few people.
Right.
So with semiconductor, it's a variety of jobs. It's not just high education jobs. There are a lot of technical jobs, and there's a lot of skill levels and wage levels that come with that. But it does entail a lot of employment as well as investment. So the EOA does recognize that as a particularly valuable sector to try to see come to town. But as far as looking at the costs of it, that hasn't been like I said, it wasn't part of the scope or requirement.
Question.
Is there kind of a broader question that comes to mind, or?
I've been pro growth for what feels like decades, so it seems odd to want to pause here, but it seems like an amazing opportunity. And where that's located in Hillsborough seems very appropriate for what's around it. And we've had so little good, solid planning in North Plains. And I would just want us to take a hot minute in everyone's excitement to be pretty thoughtful about 20, 50 years from now, are we going to be happy with some massive fabs where we place them relative to everything else? So I don't know, it feels like there's lots of momentum very quickly. We're competing with Hillsborough, there's lots of dollars, we want jobs, we have a plan that says we need this. So all of that feels good. I'm just really cognizant of how unattractive fabs are and where we would want to strategically place them when we sit back and not just think in the next little bit, but think 50 years ago. So I guess I want to know who's doing that. Because we're like, yay, we're economic development and this says it good. Yay, it's not data centers. But who's sitting back and having the more qualitative life, health, aesthetics perspective on this, which may be outside of the scope of this meeting. So yes, I want it, and I want to know somebody's got our back and who's thinking about where and how.
Okay, so actually that is addressed.
Okay.
That's addressed by goal 14 of the UGB planning process that we've been in the middle of, and that's the urbanization goal. So all of the land in our study areas has been scored based on the four. Actually, I'm sorry, goal 5, not goal 14. Well, in the urbanization, we do have to look at the suitability of land for different uses, but goal 5, all potential urbanization areas have to be scored based on positives and negatives about energy usage or conservation, social, impact upon the community, positive or negative, economic impact upon the city, positive or negative, and environmental impact upon the city.
I did put all those numbers into a database, if that's what a Google spreadsheet looks like. To try to like make sense of where they were putting stuff.
That's goal
So
5.
that's ringing a bell, if you understand that.
That's goal 5. So all the land for expansion, so some areas score highly for residential. But they score poorly for industrial because, for instance, putting a data center or a fab right next door to this residential community area would be a terrible idea. So certain things score better on, so lands that score better for more purely industrial uses will be planned for those things. So things that score more highly for pure industrial uses and have lower impact on other nearby uses, social or energy or whatever, environmental, those things will be planned for areas that have lower impact scores. So land is being, potentially the expansion areas are being categorized based on what their qualities are through those screens and scores specifically.
I have super high respect for you personally, like your expertise, and as I said, I took in those numbers and really tried to understand them. And I think those are inputs to a plan. I don't think they make me feel like someone's really got an overall plan in place and thought through the trade-offs of when we decide this is what it means to that. Those are just, those numbers to me represent inputs to good planning.
Mhm.
It doesn't say you should automatically accept that that's a high score and therefore put that there. You should sit back, look at all that, and imagine what it's gonna look like after years. Right?
And-
And that's what the whole pack should be doing, right?
And that is the next study we start probably late February with the
Okay.
$210,000 grant we got from DLCD, the concept planning grant, where we actually work through the concept plan for for where the expansion actually happens.
And is that in the order of, this is where I have to confess, I lose track of the timeline and it keeps sliding. It feels like to me is like that precedes UGB decision-making, or it is like, oh,
So the current so that concept plan process starts after the new UGB line has been decided.
okay,
So the line gets drawn around the areas to bring in based on how well they scored.
okay,
And areas are brought in of sufficient quantity that score well or don't score poorly for the different uses.
Yeah.
The concept planning stage is to put together a comprehensive plan for those lands that get more into the questions you're talking about.
okay.
Yes.
So based on what you just said, we should expect a UGB border decision next month.
A recommendation to council in February, yeah. Yeah, and then council will take it up, adopt the recommendations, that goes to the county and the state.
Yeah.
And then as soon as that's done, we kick off the concept planning process that gets into, okay, now let's get into what this land looks like when it's built and what should be here, what shouldn't be there very specifically.
Do you have to hear back from the county and state on approving that boundary before the concept plan?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
So that goes on simultaneously.
The county and the state are on the advisory committee and are regularly updated on this. And at this point, the LCD is helping carry the ball for us. For a few different reasons that are in our favor. So despite the process we went through on our employment plans process with them, they now are working far more with us for us, and for a number of reasons. So that's great news. But we can begin the concept planning process because the assumption is that the moving forward assumption and procedure is that that's a procedural process for the county. The county has to amend it, basically vote to amend its comprehensive plan to take land, unincorporated land out of their plan and let the city put into their comprehensive plan that conversion of lands. And then the state has to legally stamp the UG, approve the LCDC, the Land Conservation and Development Commission, has to be the one to vote to approve the UGB change. So those two bodies vote. But that's coming up in the spring. But we will move forward with the concept planning stage immediately after council makes their decision, or right around that time.
I appreciate you patiently going through that with me again.
It's quite all right. It's something that it's something you're not supposed to be doing any more than every 5 years. So imagine trying to you do it only once every 5 years if you're lucky. So imagine trying to be on top of being an expert on it, only on one thing once every 5 years. Questions are good and walking through it is good.
Right, UGB. Good, no other questions, I don't think. Really, like I said, I was anticipating this one just being a pretty quick meeting, so if there's any other topics, new developments in town, Taco Bell opens.
Their grand opening is the 14th,
Soft open.
Valentine's Day.
January.
Oh, January. I guess not that good.
Milestone.
Yeah, I mean, it happened,
It did.
it finally happened.
That wasn't right.
No, right, it's just online.
Just lines in the drive-through.
Oh,
Yeah.
I get my credit.
Any word as far as Bill, on the Roll Tide vacancies, just since last month, I suppose.
The building still stands vacant. Dave's a great guy. Dave actually was my oldest son's Hillsborough Parks and Rec coach, soccer coach when he was younger. He's a great guy. And he's been a great guy for a very long time, but he is doing all of this himself. So he's operating in a different time frame than your typical retail developer. I've heard nothing out of him since the last meeting. I think he's been gone for the holidays with family quite a bit. I would expect some announcements of tenants planning to open at a certain time, but it's just he operates on a different schedule.
Any other topics you'd like to discuss, cover? I think so.
I think the other thing I would say as far as development, and we haven't talked about it in a little while, but the Glencoe Opportunity Area, the developers are working on changing up their development team a little bit because they like pretty much every other development project of any size around has been reeling with the chaotic nature of cost increases on different things. And they are going to pursue working with somebody else to help them work on costs and then come back. Once they can get what they've told me is once they can get a handle with a new team member on some of the costs that they were really trying to work on, they have spent about $500,000 on the project so far. They're committed. It's just they needed to get over the hump on a couple specific things. So I would anticipate that in February sometime, and later this month or in February, we'll hear them come back to us and say, we've changed our team. This is our new time frame, but it should be reasonably timely time frame for that to move forward. But they've just been wrestling with some costs on things.
And is that, just for my own knowledge, is that like building material costs or services?
Yeah, so building material costs, trying to figure out one of the biggest costs honestly is the fact that the entire property needs to be scraped of topsoil down about 18 inches. That is a ton of soil for a project of this size, and what to do about it. And how much it might cost, because some of the property near the old gas station, that topsoil can't just take all that topsoil out to a farmer, it's not completely clean according to DEQ. Some of it might have to be put into a berm of some kind. Some of it might have to actually be paid for disposal at the Hillsborough landfill. And one of the team member that they'll be adding, they'll be bringing on has a bit more experience with those sorts of things, that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The rumor that the grocery store got risk is,
Unfounded. If it, this just hypothetically speaking, the development team is particularly given the progress we've made on the UGB. Everybody's still in, but even if the development team fell away for whatever remotely, not expected to happen, the grocery store would try to figure out a way to still be there. They very much want to be near the free. They very much want to be near the freeway on the way to the coast. They see it as a great linkage with their existing business, with coastal residents who come into town and people stopping on the way to the coast. They just see it as a great location.
that's great, I appreciate it.
Okay. So, Councilor Sheldon, anything on your end you'd like to mention or discuss?
I can't think of anything specifically, but I would just, be deliberate in your activities, because I think there's going to be a lot more work going forward or forthcoming. And a lot of that has to do with, obviously, our opportunities and the growth of our UGB. And so, the statement earlier about, who's got our back kind of thing is the council does. The council's on top of this. I think we have a cohesive understanding of the direction we want to go, and we're not going to lose an opportunity. But this stuff doesn't develop overnight. These things take time, working through the realm of the things that Bill spoke to in terms of how we, make these things happen. It's not that the vision isn't there. It just takes time to implement that. We have to be patient. And I would just encourage you to, be thinking about in your participation going forward in the opportunities that we have with the expansion that we're going to do, regardless of what the state does. We have to go forward. We have to think about our own future, that it's balanced, how it looks. Certainly all those things are important. So I would just encourage you to continue on that basis and be deliberate in how you think about those things.
All right. I think we'll go ahead and call this meeting adjourned, 6:41 p.m. Thank you everyone for joining. Happy New Year.
Good year.
You too.
Take care.
No gavel?